I thought I knew my son. I thought I knew the kind of man I'd raised. For 28 years I'd been there for every moment of his life. Every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every triumph. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital to afford his college tuition. I'd co-signed his first apartment lease when no one else would. I'd held his hand through his father's funeral and told him that no matter what, we'd always have each other. So when I found that wedding album hidden in the back of my hall closet, tucked behind old winter coats and boxes of Christmas decorations, my first thought was confusion. Why would there be a wedding album in my house that I'd never seen before? And then I opened it. Page after page of my son Marcus's wedding, the wedding that happened 3 years ago, the wedding I'd helped plan, the wedding where I'd worn that beautiful lavender dress and cried tears of joy as I watched him marry Catherine. Except in this album I didn't exist. Not a single photograph included me. Not one. There were photos of Catherine's mother in every possible pose. There she was adjusting Catherine's veil. There she was dancing with Marcus. There she was cutting the cake alongside the happy couple. There were photos of distant relatives I barely remembered meeting. There were photos of college friends whose names I couldn't recall. But me? The woman who'd raised Marcus alone after his father died when he was 12? The woman who'd sacrificed everything to give him the life he deserved? I'd been erased. Completely and systematically erased from one of the most important days of his life. My hands trembled as I turned each page, searching desperately for just one photo, just one image that proved I'd been there, that proved I mattered. Nothing. It was as if I'd never existed, as if some other woman had raised my son, had been his mother, had earned the right to stand beside him on his wedding day. I sat on the floor of that closet, surrounded by dusty coats and forgotten belongings, and I felt something crack inside my chest. It wasn't just hurt. It was the sudden, devastating realization that the relationship I thought I had with my son might have been nothing but an illusion. And as I sat there, staring at a photo of Catherine's mother straightening Marcus's boutonniere, a moment that should have been mine, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't seen it. I was going to remind them exactly how central I was to their family, and I was going to do it in a way they'd never forget. But to understand why this hurt so deeply, you need to know who I was to Marcus. You need to know what I'd sacrificed, what I'd given up, and what I thought we'd built together over nearly 3 decades. You need to know the whole story. Marcus was born on a cold February morning in 1995. I was 26 years old, young enough to still have dreams of my own but old enough to know that motherhood would change everything. His father, David, was my high school sweetheart. We'd married at 23. Both of us full of hope and plans for the future. David was a construction foreman, hardworking and honest. I was finishing my nursing degree at the community college, juggling classes with part-time work at a grocery store. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. We were building something together. When Marcus arrived, everything did change, but in the most beautiful way. He was this perfect little human with David's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. I remember the first time I held him, looking down at his tiny face and feeling this overwhelming sense of purpose. This was it. This was what I was meant to do. Be his mother. Protect him. Love him. Give him the world. Those early years were hard but wonderful. David worked long hours on construction sites, often leaving before dawn and coming home after dark. I'd graduated and started working as a nurse at County General, working the night shift so we wouldn't have to pay for daycare. We'd pass Marcus between us like a precious baton. David would watch him during the day while I slept, and I'd take over when David got home. We were exhausted all the time, running on coffee and determination, but we were doing it. We were raising our son. We were making it work. Marcus was a bright, curious child. He asked endless questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds go at night? How does the refrigerator make things cold? David and I would take turns answering, sometimes making up silly explanations just to hear him laugh. He loved building things with his father: blocks, Legos, elaborate cardboard cities that would take over our entire living room. And he loved when I'd read to him before bed, doing different voices for all the characters, making him giggle so hard he'd get hiccups. When Marcus was 7, David started complaining about headaches. Terrible, blinding headaches that would leave him unable to work for days at a time. He'd take aspirin and push through it, insisting he was fine, that it was just stress. But I knew something was wrong. A wife knows. A nurse knows. I finally convinced him to see a doctor. The tests revealed a brain tumor. Aggressive and inoperable. The doctor gave him 18 months. He lived for 11. Those 11 months destroyed us financially and emotionally. David had insurance through his job, but it didn't cover everything. There were experimental treatments, specialists, medications that cost hundreds of dollars per dose. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working sometimes 16 hours straight, coming home to care for David and try to maintain some sense of normalcy for Marcus. But how do you maintain normalcy when your husband is dying, and your 8-year-old son knows it? Marcus became quiet during that time. The cheerful, talkative boy who'd asked a million questions about everything started retreating into himself. He'd sit beside David's hospital bed, holding his father's hand, not saying anything, just being there. I'd watch them together and my heart would break over and over again. This wasn't fair. This wasn't what I'd wanted for my son. This wasn't the childhood he deserved. David died on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 weeks after Marcus's 9th birthday. I was there, holding his hand as he took his last breath. Marcus was at school. I'd sent him to school that morning because I didn't know it would be the last day, and part of me is grateful for that. He got to say goodbye the night before, got to tell his father he loved him, got to have one more normal morning before his entire world changed. The funeral was small. David's family helped with the costs, but even so, I went into debt to give him a proper burial. He deserved that. My son deserved to see his father honored and remembered. But after the funeral, after everyone went home and the casseroles stopped arriving and the sympathy cards stopped filling our mailbox, it was just Marcus and me. Two people trying to figure out how to be a family when a crucial piece was missing. I threw myself into being both mother and father to Marcus. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every soccer game. I learned how to throw a football because that's what David would have done. I helped with math homework even though I'd always been terrible at math. I stayed up late baking cookies for school fundraisers and woke up early to make sure Marcus had a good breakfast before school. I worked as many hours as I could at the hospital to keep us afloat financially, but I never missed the important moments. Never. Money was always tight. There were months where I had to choose between buying groceries or paying the electric bill on time. There were Christmases where I'd apologize to Marcus that we couldn't afford the expensive toy he'd asked for. And he'd hug me and say it was okay, that he didn't need it. He was such a good kid. Understanding and grateful and never demanding. But I knew what other kids had. I knew what I couldn't give him. And it killed me. When Marcus turned 13, he came to me and said he wanted to get a part-time job. Just a few hours a week after school. Helping at the corner store. He said he wanted to save up for a new bike, but I knew the truth. He wanted to help. He'd seen the stress on my face, the bills piled on the kitchen table, the worry I tried to hide. At 13 years old, my son was trying to take care of me. I told him no at first. I told him his job was to be a kid, to focus on school, to enjoy these years. But he insisted. He was stubborn like me, so I let him. And every week, he'd come home with his small paycheck and try to give me half of it for groceries. I'd refuse, of course, but the gesture, the pure love behind it, would bring me to tears after he'd gone to bed. High school was both wonderful and terrifying. Marcus excelled academically. He was smart, focused, driven. His teachers told me he had real potential, that he could go to a good college, that he could do something significant with his life. But college costs money. A lot of money. Money we didn't have. I started working extra shifts again, picking up every holiday and overtime opportunity that came available. I started a savings account specifically for Marcus's education. Every extra dollar went into that account. I stopped buying new clothes for myself. I stopped going out with friends. I drove a car that was falling apart and learned to fix small problems myself because I couldn't afford a mechanic. Every sacrifice was worth it if it meant Marcus could have opportunities I'd never had. Marcus got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship. It was a proud moment, one of the proudest of my life. But the scholarship didn't cover everything. There was still tuition, housing, books, living expenses. I'd saved what I could, but it wasn't enough. So I took out a second mortgage on our small house. I used my credit cards. I borrowed from my retirement account. I did whatever I had to do to make it work. Because this was Marcus's future. This was his chance. And what kind of mother would I be if I let financial concerns stand in the way of his dreams? During his college years, I'd drive 2 hours each way to visit him on weekends, bringing him home-cooked meals and clean laundry. He'd try to tell me I didn't need to do that he could manage on his own, but I wanted to. I wanted him to know that even though he was growing up and becoming independent, he still had a mother who loved him, who was thinking about him, who was there whenever he needed her. Those drives were long and exhausting, especially after working a full shift at the hospital, but seeing his face light up when I arrived made every mile worth it. Marcus graduated with honors. I cried through the entire ceremony, thinking about David and wishing he could have been there to see it. Our son, our brilliant, wonderful son, had done it. He'd graduated from college. He'd beaten the odds. He'd become the man we'd always hoped he'd be. After graduation, Marcus got a job at a marketing firm in the city. It was entry-level, but it was a start. He moved into a small apartment, and I helped him furnish it with things from my house and items I'd picked up at thrift stores. I was so proud of him, so incredibly proud. He'd call me several times a week, telling me about his job, his coworkers, his life. And I'd listen, offering advice when he asked for it, celebrating his victories, commiserating with his frustrations. We were close, or at least I thought we were. That's when he met Catherine. He'd mentioned her a few times, a colleague at work, someone funny and smart who'd caught his attention. Then he mentioned her more often. Then he was dating her. Then it was serious. I was happy for him. I wanted Marcus to find love, to have what his father and I had, to build a life with someone who'd support him and challenge him and stand beside him through everything. We met for the first time at a restaurant downtown. Catherine was polished and professional, wearing designer clothes and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was beautiful in that glossy magazine cover way that seemed almost intimidating. Her handshake was firm, her smile perfect. We made polite small talk over dinner. Her job in corporate communications, her family, her apartment in the expensive part of the city. She asked me a few questions about nursing, but in a way that felt obligatory rather than genuinely interested. But I told myself I was being oversensitive. She was nervous. Meeting your boyfriend's mother is always awkward. Give it time. Except time didn't make it better. Every subsequent interaction felt similarly surface level. Catherine was never rude, never overtly unkind. But there was a distance there. A subtle barrier that I couldn't seem to cross. When I'd invite them over for dinner, Catherine would often have a work conflict or prior commitment. When I'd suggest we spend time together, just the two of us, to get to know each other better, she'd agree enthusiastically, but then the plans would fall through. She'd cancel last minute or simply not respond to my follow-up messages. Marcus assured me everything was fine. Catherine was just busy with work. She wasn't used to close family relationships. Her own family was more formal, more reserved. I should just give her space and time. So I did. I stepped back. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the one who was too demanding, too involved, too much. I wanted Marcus to be happy. And if Catherine made him happy, then I'd find a way to build a relationship with her. After 2 years of dating, Marcus proposed. He called me immediately after she said yes, his voice bubbling with excitement. I was thrilled for him. Truly thrilled. He was starting a new chapter of his life, and despite my reservations about Catherine, I was determined to be supportive and involved. When he asked if I'd help with the wedding planning, I was touched. Of course I would help. This was my son's wedding. This was important. The first planning meeting was at Catherine's parents' house. I arrived right on time, bringing a notebook and some ideas I'd printed out from the internet. Catherine's mother, Patricia, answered the door. She was elegant and imposing, wearing pearls at 2 in the afternoon and carrying herself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having worried about money. The house was enormous. The kind of place you see in magazines, with high ceilings and expensive furniture and art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum. Patricia led me to the sitting room, where Catherine was already spread out on the couch with bridal magazines and fabric samples. Marcus was at work, but Catherine said he'd given his blessing for us to handle the planning. Patricia offered me tea, in a delicate china cup that I was terrified of breaking, and we started discussing options. Or rather, Patricia and Catherine started discussing options. I'd offer suggestions, And they'd smile politely and then continue with whatever they'd been talking about. I suggested the community center where David and I had held our wedding reception. It was affordable and charming and sentimental. Patricia wrinkled her nose and said something about needing a more appropriate venue for their social circle. I suggested a simple, elegant cake from the bakery in my neighborhood, run by a lovely woman who'd made Marcus's birthday cakes when he was young. Catherine said they'd already hired a pastry chef who specialized in architectural desserts. I suggested keeping the guest list small and intimate, just close family and friends. Patricia laughed and said they had at least 200 names already and were still adding more. By the end of that first meeting, I felt small and dismissed and utterly unnecessary. But I told myself it was just different expectations, different backgrounds. Catherine came from money. Patricia was used to throwing elaborate events. This was their world, not mine. I could adapt. I could learn. I could be part of this. The planning continued for months. I'd attend meetings when invited, always feeling slightly out of place, always aware that my suggestions were being politely ignored. But I kept trying. I offered to help with the invitations. They hired a calligrapher. I offered to make the wedding favors. They ordered custom items from a boutique in Manhattan. I offered to help with anything at all. They assured me they had it all under control. The only thing they did want from me was money. Not explicitly, not in so many words. But Marcus came to me 3 months before the wedding, looking uncomfortable and apologetic. The wedding was going over budget. Catherine's parents were paying for most of it, but there were still significant expenses. Could I contribute? He knew I didn't have a lot, but anything would help. It would mean so much to Catherine and her family. It would show that I was invested in this union, that I supported their future together. I didn't have extra money. The second mortgage on my house was still substantial. My credit cards were still carrying debt from Marcus's college years. I was 51 years old with almost nothing in my retirement account because I'd borrowed from it so many times to help my son. But this was his wedding. This was important to him. So I said yes. I took out another credit card. I borrowed from my 401k again, knowing I'd pay penalties. I scraped together $10,000 that I absolutely could not afford and gave it to Marcus. He hugged me and thanked me and promised he'd pay me back, though we both knew he probably wouldn't. And that was okay. That's what parents do. We sacrifice. We give. We put our children's happiness above our own financial security. At least, that's what I'd always believed. The wedding day itself was beautiful. The venue was a sprawling estate with manicured gardens, and a mansion that looked like something out of a fairy tale. There were white chairs set up in perfect rows, elaborate floral arrangements on every surface, a string quartet playing gentle music as guests arrived. I wore the lavender dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not designer, not expensive, but elegant and appropriate. I'd had my hair done at a salon, spending money I didn't have because I wanted to look nice. I wanted Marcus to be proud of me. I wanted to fit in with Catherine's family and friends. But from the moment I arrived, I felt invisible. There was no special seating designated for me. No corsage waiting. No one from the wedding party came to greet me or make sure I was comfortable. I found a seat near the middle, surrounded by strangers who were chatting about their country club and their recent vacation to the Amalfi Coast. Patricia, meanwhile, was seated in the front row, wearing a gorgeous champagne-colored dress, with a prominent corsage on her wrist. She was clearly the mother of the bride, clearly important, clearly central to this event. And where was I? The mother of the groom? The woman who'd raised Marcus alone, who'd sacrificed everything to get him to this moment. I was just another guest, indistinguishable from anyone else. The ceremony was lovely. Marcus looked handsome in his tuxedo. Catherine looked stunning in her designer gown. They said their vows, they kissed, everyone applauded. I cried, but not just from joy. I cried from this aching sense of being forgotten, of being unnecessary. This was my son's wedding, and I felt like I didn't belong. The reception was more of the same. There was a receiving line, but I wasn't part of it. There were toasts, but no one mentioned me. Patricia gave a beautiful speech about watching Catherine grow up, about the joy of gaining a son like Marcus. Catherine's father gave a touching toast about family and love and new beginnings. But no one asked me to speak. No one acknowledged me. When it came time for the mother-son dance, the DJ announced Marcus and Patricia. Not Marcus and Emily. Marcus and Patricia. Catherine's mother danced with my son in the tradition reserved for mothers and sons, while I sat at my table, watching, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out my heart. I told myself there'd been a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd thought the mother-son dance was for the mother of the bride. Some people did it differently, right? But deep down I knew. I knew this wasn't an accident. This was a choice. Someone had decided that Patricia would fill that role, and no one had thought to ask me how I felt about it, or to include me in any meaningful way. After the wedding, I tried to push those feelings aside. I told myself it was just a long, stressful day. Planning a wedding is hard, things get overlooked. Marcus and Catherine were starting their life together, and I should be happy for them. I should focus on the positive. They'd sent me a lovely thank you note for my financial contribution. They'd invited me to brunch the day after the wedding, though I'd had to leave early for my shift at the hospital. Everything was fine. We were fine. Except we weren't fine. In the weeks and months after the wedding, I noticed a shift in my relationship with Marcus. He called less frequently. When we did talk, the conversations were shorter, more surface level. He stopped coming over for Sunday dinners, something we'd done regularly for years. He was busy, he said. Work was demanding. Catherine had social obligations. They were settling into married life. I understood. Of course I understood. But I missed him. I missed my son. I'd invite them over for holidays and they'd come, but always briefly, always with one eye on the clock. Catherine would sit on the couch looking vaguely uncomfortable, checking her phone, making polite small talk but never really engaging. Marcus would try to bridge the gap, asking me questions about work and updating me on his job, but there was a strain there that hadn't existed before. Like he was torn between two worlds, the one with his mother and the one with his wife, and increasingly choosing the latter. I tried with Catherine. I really did. I'd invite her to lunch, just the two of us. She'd agree but then cancel. I'd send her articles I thought she'd find interesting, books I thought she'd enjoy. She'd send back polite thank you messages but never continue the conversation. I'd offer to help when I heard they were redecorating their apartment. She'd thank me but say they had it handled. Every overture I made was met with a polite brick wall. If you're enjoying this story, I'd love for you to subscribe and join our community. There's so much more to come. One particular incident stands out. It was Marcus's 27th birthday, about a year after the wedding. I'd called him the week before to make plans. I wanted to take him to dinner, just the two of us, like we'd done every year since his father died. It was our tradition, our special time. But Marcus hesitated. He said Catherine had planned a party, a surprise party with his friends and her family. I was invited, of course. I should come to that instead. We could celebrate together. I went to the party. It was at their apartment, nicely decorated with balloons and a homemade banner. Catherine had ordered expensive catering and hired a bartender. All of Marcus's friends were there, people I vaguely recognized from his college years. Catherine's parents were there, prominent and social, working the room like it was their own party. And I stood in the corner, holding a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, watching my son celebrate his birthday with everyone except me. I'd brought him a gift, a watch that I'd saved up for, a nice piece that I knew he'd admire. But when I tried to give it to him, Catherine swooped in and suggested we do presents later, after everyone left. Later never came. By the time the party wound down, Marcus was tired and slightly drunk, and I left without giving him the gift. I left it on the entryway table on my way out. I don't know if he ever found it or if Catherine threw it away, thinking it was something left behind by a guest. That's when I started to realize that I was being systematically edged out of my son's life. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. It was small things, incremental changes that added up to something significant. Invitations that came late or not at all. Plans that changed without notice. Conversations that stopped including me. I was becoming peripheral, optional. An obligation to be managed rather than a relationship to be nurtured. I tried talking to Marcus about it. I called him one evening about 6 months ago and asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. I needed to talk to him about something important. He agreed and we met at a coffee shop near his office. I tried to be diplomatic, tried to express my feelings without sounding accusatory or needy. I told him I missed him. I told him I felt like we'd grown distant since the wedding. I told him I wanted to have a better relationship with Catherine, but didn't know how to make that happen. I asked if I'd done something wrong, something to offend them. I asked if there was anything I could do differently. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He stirred his coffee, not meeting my eyes. He said I was overthinking things. He said married life was busy, and they were both just trying to keep up with work and social obligations. He said Catherine liked me just fine, that she was just more reserved, that I shouldn't take it personally. He said he still loved me, still valued our relationship. But he also said, and this is the part that stuck with me like a knife between my ribs, he said that I needed to respect that he had his own family now. That Catherine was his priority. That things couldn't be the same as they were before he got married. His own family. Like I wasn't his family. Like the 28 years I'd spent raising him alone, sacrificing everything, giving him every opportunity, didn't make me his family. Like I was something separate, something less important, something that needed to be managed and limited to make room for his real family. I nodded. I said I understood. I paid for our coffees and hugged him goodbye and told him I loved him. And then I went home and cried for 2 hours. Because I did understand. I understood that I'd lost my son. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly and steadily, one small exclusion at a time. And I didn't know how to get him back. The months continued. Holiday gatherings became more strained. Mother's Day, which Marcus had never forgotten in his entire life, passed with just a text message this year. No call. No visit. Just a generic Happy Mother's Day, love you text sent at 2 p.m., like he'd suddenly remembered and felt obligated to acknowledge me. For Father's Day, which we'd always spent together, visiting David's grave and then having a quiet dinner, honoring the father Marcus had lost, Marcus made plans with Catherine's family instead. They were all going to a lake house for the weekend. I wasn't invited. I stopped pushing. I stopped calling as frequently. I stopped extending invitations that would inevitably be declined or accepted reluctantly. I told myself this was normal. This was what happened when children grew up and got married. They created new lives, new priorities. I needed to accept that. I needed to build my own life separate from Marcus. I needed to stop defining myself solely as his mother. But it hurt. Every single day it hurt. That brings us to 3 weeks ago. I was doing some long overdue cleaning, trying to organize the chaos that had accumulated over years of being too busy to properly sort through things. I'd been putting off cleaning out the hall closet because I knew it was a disaster. Old coats we no longer wore, broken umbrellas I kept meaning to repair, boxes of Christmas decorations that hadn't been touched in years, suitcases from trips we'd taken when Marcus was young. I finally decided to tackle it on a Saturday morning. Pulling everything out, sorting through what could be donated or thrown away. That's when I found it. A large flat box pushed all the way to the back of the top shelf, hidden behind a stack of winter blankets. I almost missed it entirely. I pulled it down, expecting more Christmas decorations or maybe old photo albums from when Marcus was a kid. I opened it, and my entire world tilted. It was a wedding album. Marcus and Catherine's wedding album. Professionally bound, expensive, beautifully designed. The kind of album that costs hundreds of dollars, maybe more. The kind of album that families treasure and display prominently in their homes. And it was in my closet, hidden away like something shameful. My first thought was confusion. Why was their wedding album here? Had they given it to me and I'd forgotten? Had I stored it for safekeeping? But as I opened it and started looking through the pages, confusion turned to shock, then to devastation. Every page was filled with photos from the wedding. The getting ready shots with bridesmaids laughing and drinking champagne. The ceremony with Marcus and Catherine exchanging vows under an arch of flowers. The reception with dancing and toasts and cake cutting. Every moment of that day captured in beautiful, high-resolution photographs. But I wasn't in any of them. Not a single one. I flipped through the pages slowly at first, thinking I must be missing something. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. There were dozens of photos of Patricia, adjusting Catherine's veil, helping her into her dress, straightening Marcus's boutonniere, dancing with him during what should have been my dance, cutting the cake alongside the bride and groom like she was somehow parent to both of them. There were photos of Catherine's father walking her down the aisle, giving his toast, laughing with Marcus. There were photos of bridesmaids, groomsmen, flower girls, random guests I'd never seen before. There were even photos of the caterers, for God's sake. But Emily, Marcus's mother? The woman who'd raised him alone after his father died? The woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion to give him every opportunity? The woman who'd gone into debt to pay for his education and contribute to this very wedding? I'd been erased, photoshopped out of existence, removed from the narrative of my son's most important day. I found one photo where I should have been visible. I remembered the moment. It was during the cocktail hour, and I'd been standing near the garden entrance, talking to one of David's old friends who'd made the trip to be there. In the photo there was David's friend, clearly mid-conversation. But the space where I'd been standing was just empty, blurred, edited out. Someone had literally removed me from the photograph. I sat on the floor of my hallway, surrounded by the mess I'd pulled from the closet, staring at this album and trying to understand. Why? Why would they do this? Why would they create an entire wedding album that excluded me? And why was it hidden in my house? That last question had an answer, at least. I remembered vaguely about 2 months after the wedding. Marcus and Catherine had stopped by briefly, one of those quick visits that felt more obligatory than genuine. Catherine had asked if they could store some boxes in my closet temporarily. They were renovating their apartment, something about painting and needing things out of the way. Could I keep a few boxes for them? Just for a little while? Of course I'd said yes. Of course I'd wanted to help. They'd brought in several boxes, stacked them in the hall closet, and I'd forgotten about them. They'd never come back to retrieve them. And now I knew why. One of those boxes contained the evidence of how little I mattered to them. They'd hidden it here, probably planning to eventually retrieve it, never thinking I'd find it. Or maybe, and this thought made me feel sick, maybe they'd wanted me to find it. Maybe this was a message. A way of showing me exactly where I stood in their lives without having to say it out loud. Look at this wedding album. Look at all these photos. See how many people were important enough to include. See who was important enough to be remembered. Now notice who isn't there. Notice who doesn't matter. Notice who we wish hadn't been there at all. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept going back to that album, flipping through it again and again, hoping I'd somehow missed something, hoping there was some explanation that made sense. But there wasn't. There was just the cruel, undeniable truth. My son and his wife had deliberately created a version of their wedding day that didn't include me. And they'd done it so thoroughly, so completely, that anyone looking at this album would never know I'd been there at all. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying moments from the wedding in my head. The way no one had greeted me when I arrived. The way I'd had to find my own seat. The way I'd watched Patricia dance with Marcus. The way no one had asked me to speak or acknowledged my presence in any meaningful way. At the time, I told myself these were oversights, unfortunate but unintentional. But now I knew better. It had all been deliberate. They'd wanted me on the sidelines. They'd wanted me insignificant. And they'd succeeded. By morning, I'd moved through devastation and landed on something else. Anger. I'd spent nearly 30 years putting Marcus first. I'd sacrificed my financial security, my social life, my own dreams and plans. I'd worked myself to exhaustion. I'd gone without so he could have. I'd loved him with everything I had, unconditionally and completely. And this was how he repaid me? By erasing me from his life. By allowing his wife and her family to push me out? By treating me like an embarrassment, something to be hidden and minimized? No, I wasn't going to accept this. I wasn't going to quietly fade into the background and pretend this was okay. I'd been accommodating enough. I'd been understanding enough. I'd respected their space and their boundaries and their new life together. And where had that gotten me? Hidden in a closet like a shameful secret. I needed to think strategically. I needed to decide what I wanted from this confrontation because confrontation was inevitable. There was no way I could see that album and not address it. But what did I want? An apology? An explanation? Recognition of how deeply they'd hurt me? Or something more? I spent the next few days thinking. Planning. I went to work, functioned normally, smiled at patients and chatted with colleagues. But underneath my mind was working. I thought about what mattered to Marcus and Catherine. I thought about their image, their social circle, their carefully curated life. I thought about how they'd made me invisible and what would happen if I suddenly became very, very visible. First, I needed information. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I got on social media, something I rarely used, and started looking at Catherine's profiles. She was active on Instagram, posting carefully filtered photos of their life. Their apartment with its expensive furniture and designer touches. Their weekend trips to wineries and beach houses. Their dinner parties with photogenic food and beautiful friends. And yes, there were photos from the wedding. Lots of them. Catherine in her dress. Marcus in his tux. Catherine and Patricia arms around each other. Marcus and Catherine's father laughing together. The happy couple cutting their elaborate cake. But in none of these public posts, in none of these curated glimpses into their wedding day, was there a single photo that included me. I looked at Marcus's social media next. He was less active, but he'd posted a few wedding photos as well. Same story. I'd been systematically excluded from their public presentation of that day. To anyone looking at their social media, at their carefully constructed narrative, I simply didn't exist. Marcus was a man who'd appeared fully formed, with no history, no mother who'd raised him, no backstory of sacrifice and love. He was just Catherine's husband, part of her world, integrated into her family. I also discovered something else while scrolling through Catherine's Instagram. About 6 months ago, she'd posted about a dinner party they'd hosted. The caption talked about being grateful for Marcus's parents and included a photo of the 4 of them. Marcus, Catherine, Patricia, and Catherine's father. All dressed up and smiling. Marcus's parents. Not Marcus's mother and Catherine's parents. Just parents. Plural. Like Patricia was somehow my substitute. Like she'd absorbed the role of Marcus's mother in addition to being Catherine's. And I'd been rendered obsolete. The more I learned, the angrier I became. But I kept that anger controlled, channeled. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to make my point in a way they couldn't ignore, dismiss, or minimize. Then, about a week after discovering the album, I got a phone call. It was Catherine, which was unusual. She never called me. She'd text occasionally, brief and polite, but actual phone calls were rare. Her voice was bright and friendly, almost aggressively cheerful. She had exciting news, she said. She and Marcus were hosting a dinner party in 2 weeks. A big one with family and friends. They'd love for me to come. Could I make it? It would mean so much to them. I almost laughed. After months of distance, of canceled plans and declined invitations, suddenly they wanted me at their dinner party? The timing was suspicious. Had they realized the boxes were still in my closet? Were they worried I'd found the album? Or was this just convenient? They needed to fill seats and I was a warm body? But I said yes. Of course I'd come. I'd love to be there. Thank you so much for inviting me. Catherine sounded pleased, even relieved. She gave me the details, the date, the time, what to wear, cocktail attire she specified. She mentioned that Catherine's parents would be there, along with several of Marcus's colleagues and some of Catherine's childhood friends. It was going to be a lovely evening, she said. A chance for everyone to catch up. After I hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand thinking, they'd given me an opportunity. They'd invited me into their carefully constructed world, their social circle, their curated life. They'd opened a door. And I was going to walk through it and remind them exactly who I was and what I'd done for Marcus. I was going to make sure everyone at that party knew the truth. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I went through old photos, pulling together a collection that told the story of Marcus's life. Marcus as a baby, held by his father and me. Marcus as a toddler learning to walk. Marcus on his first day of school, missing his front teeth, grinning at the camera. Marcus at his father's funeral, 9 years old in an oversized suit, holding my hand. Marcus at his middle school graduation. Marcus in his soccer uniform. Marcus at his high school graduation, both of us beaming. Marcus moving into his college dorm. Marcus at his college graduation. Dozens of photos documenting his life from birth to adulthood. A life I'd been central to. A life I'd shaped and supported and made possible. I also gathered documents. Report cards showing his academic achievements. Awards he'd won. Acceptance letters from colleges. Even some of the financial documents. The loan papers from when I'd taken out the second mortgage to pay for his education. The statements from when I'd borrowed from my 401k. The receipt for the $10,000 contribution I'd made to his wedding. Evidence of sacrifice. Proof of love. Documentation of everything I'd given up to ensure his success. I made copies of everything. I organized it all into a presentation, nothing fancy, just a simple digital slideshow set to music. Photos and documents arranged chronologically, telling the story of a single mother raising a son alone. Sacrificing. Struggling. Succeeding. The story that Marcus and Catherine seemed determined to forget. I also did something I'd never done before. I reached out to David's family. His brother, Marcus's uncle Tom, lived about 3 hours away. We'd stayed in touch over the years, but not closely. I called him and explained what had happened. I told him about the wedding album, about being excluded, about feeling erased from my son's life. Tom was furious. He remembered all the years I'd worked myself to exhaustion. He remembered the sacrifices. He said if I needed anything, support, backup, someone to stand with me, he'd be there. I thanked him and asked if he'd be willing to come to the dinner party. I wanted Marcus to see that his father's family hadn't forgotten where he came from, even if he had. Tom said he'd be there. I bought a new dress for the party. Not expensive, I still couldn't afford expensive, but nice. Elegant. Sophisticated. I wanted to look good. I wanted to walk into that dinner party with my head high, confident and composed. I wasn't going to show up looking defeated or pitiful. I was going to show up looking like exactly what I was. A strong woman who'd overcome tremendous obstacles and raised an incredible son, and who would not be erased or forgotten. The night of the party arrived. I drove to Marcus and Catherine's apartment building, a sleek high-rise in the expensive part of the city. I found parking and sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering my courage. I had my purse, which contained a flash drive with my presentation. I had my phone fully charged. I had my determination. I could do this. I would do this. The apartment was on the 12th floor. I took the elevator up, listening to the smooth jazz playing overhead, watching the numbers climb. When the doors opened, I could hear the party, voices and laughter, music playing, the sound of people enjoying themselves. I walked down the hallway to their apartment and knocked. Catherine answered the door. She looked stunning as always, in a designer cocktail dress and perfect makeup. Her smile was bright and welcoming. "Emily, so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." She kissed the air near my cheek and ushered me inside. The apartment was packed. 20, maybe 25 people, all dressed beautifully, all holding wine glasses and small plates of expensive-looking appetizers. The furniture had been rearranged to create a more open flow. There were candles everywhere, soft lighting, fresh flowers in elegant vases. It looked like something from a magazine spread. Marcus came over immediately, hugging me. "Mom! Hey! Thanks for coming." He looked happy, relaxed. No indication that anything was wrong, or that he felt any guilt about how he treated me. Just casual, friendly, like I was any other guest. "Of course," I said, hugging him back. "Wouldn't miss it." Catherine took my hand and started leading me around the room, introducing me to people. "This is Emily, Marcus's mother." Each introduction was the same, polite, brief, immediately moving on to the next person. I shook hands, smiled, made small talk. I met Catherine's childhood friends, who were all similar versions of Catherine herself. Polished, professional, successful. I met Marcus's colleagues from work, young and ambitious and dressed in expensive casual clothes. And then I was introduced to Patricia and Catherine's father, Roger, who were holding court near the windows. "Emily, how lovely to see you again," Patricia said, her voice warm but her eyes calculating. She kissed my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark I'd have to wipe away later. Roger shook my hand with a firm grip and said something generic about it being a nice evening. I smiled. I chatted. I accepted a glass of wine from a passing server. I blended in, just another guest at the party. And all the while I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came about an hour into the evening. Catherine tapped a knife against her wine glass, getting everyone's attention. "Can I have everyone gather in the living room for just a moment? Marcus and I have some exciting news to share." Everyone moved toward the living room, finding seats on the couches and chairs, others standing with their backs against the walls. I positioned myself near the TV, close to where Catherine and Marcus were standing. Tom had arrived about 30 minutes earlier, Marcus had been surprised to see his uncle but pleased, giving him a big hug and immediately getting absorbed in conversation. Tom was now standing near the back of the room, giving me a subtle nod, back up like he'd promised. Catherine, still holding her wine glass, beamed at the assembled crowd. So Marcus and I have been talking a lot about the future lately, about what we want, where we're going. And we're excited to announce that we've decided to start trying for a baby. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Patricia rushed forward to hug Catherine. Marcus's colleagues clapped him on the back. Everyone was thrilled, celebratory. This was the exciting news. They were planning to have a child. I stayed where I was watching, waiting. Catherine continued, her arm around Marcus's waist. We know it's a big step, but we're so ready. We have such an amazing support system, our friends, our family. Patricia has already offered to help with childcare, which is incredible. We just feel so blessed and so ready for this next chapter. Patricia, Catherine's mother. The built-in childcare, the assumed grandmother, the support system. Not me. They were planning to have a child, my grandchild, and they'd already decided that Patricia would be the involved grandparent. I apparently didn't factor into their plans at all. That's when I stepped forward. That's wonderful news, I said, my voice calm and clear. Congratulations. I'm sure you'll be wonderful parents. Catherine looked slightly surprised that I'd spoken up, but she recovered quickly. Thank you, Emily. We appreciate that. Of course, I continued. It's such an important role being a parent. So much responsibility. So much sacrifice. I paused, making eye contact with Marcus. I'd know. I've been doing it alone for nearly 30 years. The room had gone quiet. People were looking at me now, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Mom, we know. And we're grateful for everything you've done. Are you? I asked, my voice still calm but with an edge now. Because I'm not sure you do know. I'm not sure either of you understand what I gave up, what I sacrificed to raise Marcus and give him the opportunities that led to this moment, to this life you're both living. Catherine's smile had frozen. Patricia was watching me with narrowed eyes. But I didn't care. I pulled the flash drive from my purse and walked over to their TV. Do you mind if I show everyone something? It'll just take a minute. Mom, what are you doing? Marcus's voice had a warning tone. I'm reminding people of some important history, I said, plugging the flash drive into the TV. Since it seems to have been forgotten. The TV screen came to life and my slideshow began. The first photo was of baby Marcus, cradled in my arms in the hospital, me looking exhausted but radiant. The next photo showed David holding Marcus, both of them grinning at the camera. Then Marcus as a toddler, then starting school. Each photo appeared on the screen for a few seconds before transitioning to the next, accompanied by soft music. This is Marcus, I narrated, my voice steady. Born February 12, 1995. His father, David, and I were so excited to be parents. We didn't have much money, but we had love. We had plans. We were going to give this boy everything. The photos continued. Marcus growing up, always smiling, always loved. Then photos from David's illness. David in a hospital bed, Marcus sitting beside him. The funeral, with 9-year-old Marcus in that oversized suit. When Marcus was 8, David was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He died 11 months later. Marcus was 9 years old. And suddenly it was just the two of us. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. I worked double shifts at the hospital to keep us afloat. I went into debt to pay for David's treatment. I did everything I could to give Marcus a normal childhood, to make sure he felt loved and secure even though his father was gone. More photos. Marcus at soccer games, me cheering from the sidelines. Marcus at school events, me sitting proudly in the audience. Marcus's high school graduation, both of us beaming. I never missed a parent-teacher conference. Never missed a game or a play. I was there for every moment, even when I was exhausted, even when I was working 70-hour weeks just to pay the bills. I looked at Marcus. Do you remember when you were 13 you wanted to get a part-time job? You said it was to save for a bike, but I knew the truth. You wanted to help me. You'd seen the bills, seen how much I was struggling. That's the kind of kid you were. Thoughtful. Caring. Aware of what I was sacrificing for you. The photos shifted to Marcus's college years. The acceptance letter. Marcus moving into his dorm. Marcus at graduation. When Marcus got accepted to State University, I was so proud. But college is expensive. The scholarship didn't cover everything. So I took out a second mortgage on my house. I borrowed from my 401k. I used credit cards. I did whatever I had to do to make sure Marcus could go to college, could have the education and opportunities I'd never had. I displayed the loan documents on the screen, proof of the financial burden I'd taken on. This is the paperwork from that second mortgage. $60,000 I borrowed against my home to pay for Marcus's education. I'm still paying it off. I'll probably be paying it off when I retire, if I can ever afford to retire. The room was completely silent now. People were staring at the screen, at the documents, at me. Marcus looked pale. Catherine looked furious, but she wasn't stopping me. And then Marcus met Catherine, I continued. I was happy for him. I wanted him to find love. When they got engaged, I was thrilled. When they asked me to help with the wedding, I was honored. And when they needed financial help with the wedding, I gave them $10,000. I displayed that receipt on the screen too. $10,000 I didn't have. $10,000 I borrowed again because I wanted Marcus to have the wedding he and Catherine wanted. Because that's what parents do. We sacrifice. We give. We put our children first. The slideshow continued with photos from the wedding. But these weren't from the hidden album. These were photos I'd taken on my phone, candid shots of the venue, the decorations, the guests. And photos other people had taken that included me, posted on social media, that I'd managed to find and save. This was the wedding, I said. It was beautiful, expensive, elaborate. Everything Catherine and her family wanted. And I was there. I wore this dress. I pointed to a photo of myself, standing awkwardly near the garden. I sat in the middle section with the other guests. I watched Patricia straighten Marcus's boutonniere. I watched Patricia dance with my son during the mother-son dance. I sat at a table with strangers while the family, Catherine's family, sat at the head table. I was there, but I was invisible. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of the hidden wedding album. I swiped through them, displaying them on the TV screen. Page after page of professional wedding photos, none of which included me. This is the official wedding album, I said. The one Marcus and Catherine had professionally made. The one they hid in a box in my hall closet, probably hoping I'd never find it. Look at these photos. Patricia helping Catherine get ready. Patricia and Marcus. Patricia and Catherine and Roger. All together like one big happy family. Marcus's colleagues. Catherine's friends. Distant relatives. Even the caterers made it into some shots. I paused, letting that sink in. But not me. Not a single photo of Marcus's mother. The woman who raised him alone. The woman who sacrificed everything. I was systematically excluded from this album. Edited out where I should have been visible. Erased. I turned to face Marcus and Catherine directly. You created an entire narrative of your wedding day that doesn't include me. You made it look like Patricia was Marcus's mother. Like I didn't exist, like my decades of sacrifice and love meant nothing. And you hid the evidence in my own house. Marcus started to speak. Mom, No, I interrupted. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to tell me I'm overreacting or that I'm misunderstanding. I found the album. I see the truth. You erased me from your wedding, and you've been erasing me from your life ever since. Fewer calls. Fewer visits. Canceled plans. Distance. And now you're announcing you're having a baby, and Patricia is already set to be the involved grandmother. And where do I fit in that picture? Nowhere. Just like the wedding album. Catherine finally found her voice. Emily, you're making a scene. This is incredibly inappropriate. Inappropriate. I laughed, a sharp sound with no humor. What's inappropriate is erasing your husband's mother from his life. What's inappropriate is taking her money and her sacrifices and then treating her like an embarrassment. What's inappropriate is replacing her with your own mother and pretending she doesn't exist. Patricia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Now see here. No, you see here, I said, turning to face her. You're Catherine's mother. That's wonderful. But you're not Marcus's mother. I am. I'm the one who raised him. I'm the one who sacrificed. I'm the one who earned the right to straighten his boutonniere and dance with him at his wedding, and be included in the family photos. You don't get to take that from me just because you have more money and a bigger house and a more impressive social circle." The room was a tableau of shocked faces. Tom was watching from the back, arms crossed, nodding slightly in support. Marcus looked devastated and furious at the same time. Catherine looked like she wanted to physically throw me out. Patricia looked apoplectic. And the guests, Marcus's colleagues and Catherine's friends, looked deeply uncomfortable, like they'd stumbled into a family drama they wanted no part of. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I'm not here to ruin your party. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to remind all of you that I exist, that I matter, that my relationship with my son isn't something you can just erase or replace because it's inconvenient or doesn't fit the image you want to project." I looked at Marcus. "I raised you to be better than this. I raised you to be grateful and kind and aware of the sacrifices others make for you. Somewhere along the way you forgot that. You forgot where you came from and who got you here." I unplugged the flash drive, put it back in my purse and picked up my coat. "Congratulations again on your pregnancy. I hope your child has a better relationship with you than you've had with me." I walked toward the door, the crowd parting to let me through. Tom followed me out. As we walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I could hear the apartment erupting behind us. Raised voices, people talking over each other. I detonated a bomb in the middle of their perfect party, their perfect life. And I didn't regret it for a second. Tom and I rode the elevator down in silence. When we got to the lobby, he pulled me into a hug. "David would be proud of you," he said quietly. "You stood up for yourself. You reminded Marcus of what matters. That took guts." I rode home that night in a daze. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by something more complicated. A mix of exhilaration and dread. I'd done it. I'd confronted them. I'd made my point in front of their entire social circle. But now what? What would happen next? Would Marcus call me? Would he be furious? Would he cut me off completely? Or would he finally understand what he'd done, what he'd lost? I didn't have to wait long to find out. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A text from Marcus. "We need to talk. Can you come by tomorrow afternoon?" My heart sank and soared at the same time. Finally, we would actually discuss this. But I was terrified of what that conversation would bring. I barely slept that night. I replayed the party scene over and over in my head, analyzing every word I'd said, every expression on people's faces. Had I been too harsh? Too public? Had I damaged my relationship with Marcus beyond repair? Or had I finally broken through to him, made him see the truth about how he'd been treating me? The next morning I called in sick to work. My supervisor didn't ask questions. I rarely called in sick, and I had plenty of time accumulated. I spent the morning pacing my house, trying to calm my nerves, rehearsing different scenarios for how the conversation might go. At 2 p.m., I drove to Marcus and Catherine's apartment. The drive felt longer than it ever had before. Like each traffic light, each turn was a test of my nerve. When I arrived at their building, my hands were shaking as I parked. I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering myself. Whatever happened next, I would handle it with dignity. I would be calm and rational and honest about my feelings. Marcus answered the door himself. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, and his hair was disheveled. He didn't hug me or kiss my cheek. He just stepped aside to let me into the apartment. Catherine was nowhere to be seen. It was just Marcus and me, standing in that expensive living room where I'd blown up their perfect dinner party. "Sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the couch. His voice was carefully controlled, giving nothing away. We sat. I on one end of the couch, Marcus on the other, a gulf of space between us, both physically and emotionally. "That was quite a show last night," he said finally. "I needed you to understand." I started. "I'm not finished," he interrupted, not unkindly. "Let me say what I need to say. Then you can respond." I nodded, pressing my lips together. "What you did was manipulative," he said quietly. "What you did was embarrassing. What you did was put me in a position where I had to explain my relationship with my mother to people I work with, people Catherine is trying to impress. You humiliated me in front of our guests." The words stung, but I forced myself to listen, to not defend myself. And, he continued, you were right. I blinked. I hadn't expected that. You were right about all of it, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. About the album, about being excluded, about feeling erased. When I discovered that album was missing from our closet, when Catherine told me you'd found it, I felt sick. Because I knew exactly why it bothered you so much. I knew because part of me had made that album missing in the first place. He stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the city below. When the photographer sent us the proofs, there were photos of you. Good photos. You looked beautiful and proud. And Catherine looked at them and said. He paused, struggling. She said my mother looked like she didn't belong there. She said she looked out of place, like she was from a different world than everyone else. And Patricia seconded it. They said it would be better if we focused the album on relevant family. Their words. Relevant family. As if you weren't relevant. As if you didn't matter. My eyes filled with tears, but I said nothing, letting him continue. I was weak, Marcus said, turning back to face me. I let them convince me that the album would look better without you in it so prominently. I let them crop and edit and remove photos. And then when we discovered the album afterward, when we realized how completely you've been erased, we felt ashamed. So ashamed that we just hid it. We put it in a box at your place and tried to pretend it didn't exist. Tried to pretend we hadn't done something cruel and hurtful. He sat back down on the couch, but this time closer to me. The thing is, I've been thinking about what you said. About how you've sacrificed everything for me. And I realized something. I've been taking that for granted. I've been assuming that what you did was what mothers are supposed to do, so it didn't require gratitude or acknowledgement. I've been so caught up in building my own life, in being accepted by Catherine's family, that I've forgotten where I came from. I've forgotten you. I reached for him, taking his hand. It was warm and solid and familiar, and I held on like a lifeline. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I'm sorry for excluding you from the album. I'm sorry for making you feel invisible. I'm sorry for letting Patricia take a role that belongs to you. I'm sorry for all of it. I cried then, letting out months of hurt and frustration and fear. Marcus pulled me into a hug, and we sat there on that expensive couch in that beautiful apartment, both of us crying, both of us hurting. What do we do now? I asked when I could finally speak. We rebuild, Marcus said. We be honest with each other. We have hard conversations. We make sure this never happens again. He pulled back slightly, looking at me. And I'm going to have a conversation with Catherine. With Patricia. I'm going to tell them that if they have a problem with you, they have a problem with me. That you are not negotiable. That you are central to who I am. And anyone who's part of my life needs to understand and respect that. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted to accept this apology and move forward. But I'd been hurt before, and I'd seen how quickly things could revert to the old dynamic. Marcus, I said carefully, I need more than an apology. I need to see change. Real sustained change. I need you to be present in my life again. I need you to fight for our relationship, the way I've always fought for you. He nodded. I know. And I will. And to his credit, he did. The first change was small but significant. He called me every Sunday without fail. We'd talk for at least an hour, really talk, not just surface level checking in. He'd ask about my work, my friends, my life. And I'd ask about his, about Catherine, about their plans for the baby. The conversations were sometimes awkward at first. We'd been out of practice at genuine connection. But gradually, we found our rhythm again. The second change was more substantial. Marcus and Catherine invited me over for dinner, just the three of us. It was tense at first. Catherine was polite but guarded, clearly still upset about the dinner party incident. But Marcus gently but firmly made it clear that he expected Catherine to treat me with respect, that his mother was not up for discussion or debate, that this was non-negotiable for him. Over the course of that dinner, Catherine finally asked me directly about my relationship with Marcus, about what she could do to understand me better, about how she could stop being part of the problem. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. I told her honestly that I wasn't asking to replace her, or to overshadow her in Marcus's life. I was just asking to be acknowledged, respected, and included. I was asking to matter. And to my surprise, Catherine listened. Really listened. And she apologized for her behavior, for letting her insecurities drive her to exclude me, for treating me like a threat instead of like my son's mother. It wasn't a complete transformation. Catherine and I never became best friends. We never developed the kind of close relationship that some mothers have with their daughters-in-law. But we reached a point of mutual respect and genuine effort toward one another. And that was enough. The third major change came a few months later, when Marcus told me they were expecting. Not in a distant phone call or a dinner party announcement. Marcus drove to my house on a Saturday morning, brought with him a small gift-wrapped box and asked me to open it. Inside were tiny booties and a note that read, "Because Grandma matters." I held those booties and cried, but this time they were happy tears. I was going to be a grandmother. My son was building a new generation, and this time I was going to be part of it. I was going to matter. I was going to be remembered and valued and included. When little Emma was born 9 months later, I was in the waiting room. Marcus called me as soon as she arrived, and I heard my son's voice cracking with emotion as he told me I had a granddaughter. I drove to the hospital immediately and met her within an hour of her birth. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Marcus placed her in my arms, and I looked down at her face and felt this overwhelming sense of redemption. This little girl was part of me. She carried my genes, my family history, and unlike my wedding album, she would never be erased. She would grow up knowing her grandmother. She would know my sacrifice. She would know my love. Looking back now, a year after that dinner party, I realized that confrontation was the turning point. I didn't realize it at the time, but my family needed to be shocked into understanding. They needed to see explicitly and undeniably what they were doing. They needed to understand that their actions had consequences, that I wasn't going to quietly fade into the background, that I deserved to be treated with respect and inclusion. I'm not saying it was the perfect approach. Therapists might argue that a calmer, more measured conversation would have been more effective. And they might be right. But I do know that my family, Marcus, Catherine, and now little Emma, are closer because of it. We're more honest. We're more present. We're more grateful for each other. I keep that hidden wedding album on a shelf in my living room now, not hidden away anymore. It's a reminder of how close I came to losing my son completely, and a testament to the importance of standing up for yourself, of not accepting less than you deserve, of fighting for the relationships that matter most. And there's a new album now too. One that Marcus and I had made together, with photos from my entire life with him, from his birth through Emma's first year. I'm in every single photo. I'm exactly where I belong. Central. Valued. Irreplaceable. Last month, Catherine surprised me by giving me framed copies of some of my favorite photos from that new album. She hung one in their living room right where everyone can see it. A picture of Marcus, me, and little Emma all smiling at the camera. Patricia tried to make a comment about clutter, but Marcus shut it down immediately. "That stays," he said firmly. "That's my family." Those words, my family, mean more to me than I can express. They mean I'm not an obligation to be managed. I'm not someone to be hidden away or erased from photo albums. I'm family. Central, valued, irreplaceable family. And while the journey to get here was painful and difficult, while I had to make a dramatic stand in front of dozens of people to be heard, I don't regret a single moment of it. Because I finally have what I've always deserved. Recognition, respect, and a place in my son's heart that cannot be questioned or diminished by anyone. The story of my hidden wedding album taught me something important. Sometimes you have to be bold enough to remind people of your worth. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to demand the respect you deserve. And sometimes the people we love need to be shocked into understanding exactly how valuable we are to them. I look at little Emma now, sleeping peacefully in her crib, and I make a silent promise. I promise that when she grows up, if she ever questions how much her grandmother loves her, I'll remind her. I'll show her the albums and the documents and the evidence of my sacrifice. I'll tell her the story of how her mother nearly lost her grandmother completely, and I'll make sure she understands the importance of valuing and cherishing the people who love you most. I'll make sure that no one, not a spouse, not society's expectations, not insecurity or jealousy, ever makes her feel like she has the right to erase me or diminish my role in our family. Because that's what I learned from this experience. Love and family and sacrifice are not things to take for granted. They're not things to edit out of the narrative or hide away in closets. They're things to honor and celebrate and acknowledge openly. And if you're watching this and you have a mother or a grandmother in your life who's sacrificed for you, who's always been there, who sometimes feels unseen or unappreciated, take a moment right now to reach out to them. Call them. Tell them you love them. Tell them they matter. Tell them they're not invisible. Don't wait for them to have to fight for your acknowledgement. Don't make them feel like they have to create a scene at a dinner party to be heard. Just tell them openly and honestly that they matter. Because life is short. Relationships are fragile. And the people who've given us the most deserve to know every single day exactly how much we value them. That's the lesson I learned from my hidden wedding album. That's the story of how I reminded my son exactly how central I am to his family. And that's the truth I live with every single day now. I matter. I've always mattered. And no album, no amount of editing or erasing can ever change that.